When you picture the Mughal Empire, what comes to mind? Probably grand emperors, magnificent forts, epic battles, right? But what if I told you the real engine of this mighty empire, its true backbone, was actually something way more humble, the village? And to really get it, we need to start with one single powerful number. 85%. That's not just a statistic, it's the key to unlocking the entire Mughal world. This number is staggering and represents the proportion of the population that didn't live in the grand cities, but out in the countryside.
And this simple fact, well, it changes everything. It means that the entire magnificent structure, the courts, the conquests, the art, the culture, all of it was financed almost entirely by the agricultural wealth produced by millions upon millions of peasants, living in villages that looked a lot like this.
So to truly understand the empire, we have to zoom in. We're going to leave the grand capitals behind and travel to the basic unit of Mughal society, a single village.
This painting gives us a glimpse into a world that is just teeming with life. This isn't just a quiet collection of huts. It's a complex, self-contained society. Let's use this image as our portal, a way to understand all the key players who made this world turn.
At the very heart of it all, of course, were the peasants. They were the ones doing the endless, back-breaking tasks of tilling, sowing, and harvesting. And notice the detail here. This wasn't primitive farming. They're using some pretty sophisticated technology, like the Persian wheel you see here, to irrigate their fields and get the most out of their land. Now, it's easy to think of peasants as just one big group, right? But the sources from the time show it was more complex. You had two main types, the Khud Kashta, who were residents farming their own land in their home village, and then you had the Pahi Kashta, who were non-resident cultivators. These were folks who might move to a different village for better tax rates, or maybe they were forced to relocate after a famine. This shows a society with a surprising amount of movement, totally challenging that old idea of a static, unchanging village.
So who was actually in charge of all this? Well, day-to-day life wasn't run by some distant official in a far-off city. It was handled by the Panchayat, an assembly of the village elders. This group was the absolute center of local justice, social order, and community life.
And they had real authority, let me tell you. Led by a headman, or a muqaddam, the panchayat basically ran the whole show. They supervised the village finances, they made sure social norms and caste rules were followed, they settled arguments between villagers, and they even organized funding for big community projects like digging a canal or getting through a flood.
And we absolutely have to talk about the vital economic role of women. They worked shoulder to shoulder with men out in the fields, but they also dominated crucial artisanal production, like spinning yarn for textiles. They were totally indispensable contributors to both the household and the wider village economy.
Okay, so we've met the people, but what exactly was all this labor producing? If you're picturing just simple subsistence farming, growing just enough to get by, think again. The reality was way more diverse and deeply commercial.
This detail from the great historical chronicle, the Ain-i-Akbari, is just incredible. I mean, think about that for a second. 43 different varieties of crops grown just around Delhi, 50 different kinds of rice in Bengal alone. This was not simple farming. This was an immensely productive agricultural engine.
And this shows just how connected the Mughal village was to the wider world. Brand new crops from the Americas were arriving and completely transforming local diets and economies. Maize, tomatoes, potatoes, chilies, all of them became staples. And tobacco? The fact that it spread so rapidly shows that even a remote peasant was now part of a new, global exchange of goods.
Of course, the state was tracking all of this meticulously. To figure out taxes fairly, they developed this really sophisticated system of land classification. Land was categorized based on how productive it was, from polage, which was top-tier land cultivated every single year, down to banjar, which was left fallow for 5 years or more. This was basically a data-driven approach to collecting revenue.
So this is where it gets really crucial, understanding the relationships between these groups. You've got the peasants doing all the work, and you've got the state collecting the revenue. But in between them stood a very, very powerful class of intermediaries.
These were the Zamindars. Think of them as the powerful landed gentry at the very top of rural society. They weren't just landlords, they had the state's authority to collect taxes, and they backed up that authority with their own small armies. They were absolutely essential intermediaries, but they were also a constant competing power that the state always had to manage.
But, and this is a huge but, the peasants were not powerless. When they felt like they were being exploited by an official or a zamindar, they used the system. The archives are filled with petitions to the panchayats demanding justice.
This shows us they had a very clear idea of their rights, and they believed in a kind of moral contract, an expectation that their rulers had obligations they were supposed to fulfill. All right, for our final piece of the puzzle, let's zoom all the way out. That village we started in, it wasn't just connected to the capital city. It was connected to the entire world, all through the flow of one precious metal. This quote from a European traveler at the time just says it all. Silver, mined in unbelievable quantities in places like Potosi in South America, was flooding the global economy. And India, with its desirable goods like textiles and spices, acted like a giant sponge, becoming the final destination for so much of that wealth.
And here's the direct impact of that global flow. All this silver allowed the Mughal state to create a stable, standardized currency, the silver rupiah. This was a total game changer. It meant the state could now demand that taxes be paid in cash, not just in grain. All of a sudden, the wheat grown in a remote village was directly linked through this coin to the silver mines of the New World.
So what we have is this incredibly dynamic, commercialized, and globally connected world. It's a complex web of peasants, powerful zamindars, and a methodical state, all fueled by grain from the fields and silver from across the oceans. But this intricate system would soon be confronted by a rising new force from Europe. And the great question is, how would it cope?